protests and politics.
That was not the easiest entrance I've ever made.
As Donald Trump looks to lock up the Hoosier state with a little help from an Indiana legend.
This man's not a Republican. He's not a Democrat. At heart, he's just a great American.
Clashes occur at his rallies in California. Tonight, we break down the race, the key Indiana primary, and we hit the streets for a battle of the sexes, justice style. Is the White House ready for a woman?
No.
Why?
Because I'm a man and I want to see a man in the White House.
A special 2-hour justice starts now. Breaking tonight, Republicans in California meet to hear from candidates for president as the Washington elite gather for some laughs in the nation's capital. Hello and welcome to a special 2-hour justice. I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. A live look at the Washington Hilton in Washington, D.C., where the White House Correspondents' Dinner is underway. President Obama will be speaking a little later, as will the evening's keynote speaker, comedian Larry Wilmore. We're going to bring you those speeches live. But first, Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz addressed delegates at the California convention today after angry protest against Donald Trump marred the last few days. Fox News senior political correspondent John Roberts is in Burlingame, California with more. John?
Judge, good evening to you, and I'll tell you what a difference a day makes. There was not a protester to be seen within a mile of the place, and that's as far as we looked. It was because I think there wasn't anybody who was calling for any protest today. It's not like people naturally come out to the Republican convention here in California and protested. It really was a function of Donald Trump's appearance here and the fact that a professional protest organization, the Answer Coalition, headquartered in Washington, D.C., also has offices in Los Angeles and San Francisco, encouraged them to come out yesterday. The protests were peaceful all the way through. I think really there was a few people who were arrested yesterday, but there was no real violence per se. But they did get to the point where they broke through the barricades. They were really trying to block off the front entrance of the hotel, and at one point they did force Donald Trump's motorcade to, rather than coming in the front entrance of the hotel and going around the back, had to get off on the 101 freeway, come through a Jersey wall, through a fence that had been taken down, up an embankment, across the back driveway, and then into the back door. I actually walked that earlier today, Judge. We did a live broadcast from there. It was a fairly easy way to get into the hotel, though somewhat unconventional for a presidential candidate. But the real protest that had a lot of people talking happened in Costa Mesa on Thursday night. Those were the ones that really got out of hand. Rocks were being thrown, police cars were being smashed up, graffiti being either written or painted on them. Those were protests that were organized by the Democratic Party of Orange County and the Young Democrats of Orange County. They had a Facebook campaign asking people to come out. To their credit, they did say on the Facebook page invitation, this is going to be a nonviolent protest. We're asking people to just protest peacefully. We don't want them blocking off the intersections. But clearly, Judge, something got out of hand because up to 20 people were arrested that night. And certainly that protest was not only disruptive, but very violent as well, Judge.
And John, isn't Costa Mesa where they actually were trying to tip over a police car? They had smashed on it. They were jumping on the hood of that police car?
They were rocking the police car. I don't know if they were actually trying to flip it over, but there was one fellow who's caught on camera. He was jumping on top of the police car. The windows of the police car were smashed out. Someone else was writing graffiti on it with what looked like a Sharpie. So and those were not Trump protesters who were doing that, or sorry, those were not Trump supporters who were doing that. That was the protesters who were doing that. One policeman was hit in the head by a rock. He had a riot helmet on, so it didn't do any damage. Also reports of rocks being thrown at passing motorists as well. So even though the Democratic Party was asking for a peaceful demonstration on Thursday night in Costa Mesa, clearly something got out of hand. It's interesting to point out, too, Judge, that Orange County really is a bastion of the Republican Party in California, which is why here in San Francisco, Francisco, which is hardly considered a bastion of conservatism in the Golden State. We saw so many protesters easily come out yesterday, answering the call, if you will, from the Answer Coalition.
And I understand, John, that there are predictions that there will be more protests at the Donald Trump rallies, and that, you know, their intent was essentially to block traffic, break down a barricade, and that there's going to be more of it. I mean, they've said that openly, but not as it relates to other Republican candidates like Kasich and Cruz.
Well, I was at a Cruz event at the Hoosier Gym just east of Indianapolis on Tuesday night. There was one lone protester there, and the protester shouted out, "You're a Canadian, you're not eligible to be president." That's the extent of the protest, really, that we see against Ted Cruz. And I haven't seen one person protest the Kasich campaign, though some of them may have come out to some of his events. But yeah, Donald Trump, there's no question about it, Judge, because of the type of candidate that he is, the type of polarizing candidate that he has proven to be, is drawing a lot of protest. And in California, where there is no shortage of Democrats, we expect that this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of protests. And when you have organizations like the Answer Coalition or the Democratic Party organizing protests, you're definitely going to see a lot of protests between now and June 7th at Donald Trump events.
The Democratic Party is smart enough to know the threat is Trump and not the other guys, or so it seems. But we will see. John Roberts, thanks for being with us. All right, and for Texas Senator Ted Cruz, this Tuesday's Indiana contest is make or break as Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner, keeps racking up those primary wins. So how are the candidates stacking up in all the most important state right now, the Hoosier state? Joining me now is Indiana Republican Party Chairman Jeff Cardwell. Good evening, Chairman.
It's great to be with you, Judge.
All right. Now, I understand, Mr. Chairman, that you are trying to stay neutral, that as it relates to Cruz or Trump or Kasich. And by the way, have you seen Kasich in Indiana?
Well, he has visited our state once earlier last week. He was here for a private fundraiser.
Okay, so he did come into the state, which seems contrary to that alliance, but we'll get into that. All right, so you're not going to tell us who you support, but you can tell us where the energy is in Indiana.
Well, I can tell you there's energy all across our state. It's a very exciting time. I can tell you, not in my lifetime have I seen so much excitement for an election, especially a primary election. I can tell you right now, from the reports from the Secretary of State's office, we have a 206% increase in early voting over 2012. And so the excitement is really incredible. And all these camps are crisscrossing our state, and it's really given the opportunity for Hoosiers to meet these candidates.
Who is the excitement for? Is it for Trump or is it for Cruz?
Well, it's really both of them are drawing huge crowds. I can tell you that Mr. Trump had a very exciting campaign down in Evansville, Indiana. He had 12,000 people that came to that rally. He did one here in the capital city.
Have you seen that many for Cruz?
I have not seen that many for Cruz.
Okay, well, that kind of answers the question. Now, I've got a lot of questions to ask you, Mr. Chairman. So let's talk about this Kasich-Cruz alliance, where Ted Cruz says Kasich has made the decision to drop out of Indiana or to withdraw from Indiana. You say he was there this week or last week. You know, did that kind of make any sense to people in Indiana? Did it backfire? Are people disgusted? Do they think it's collusion? I mean, what's the word on the street, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I think really people like to meet the candidate eye to eye, and I think the person that really spends the time on the ground, whether it's the Cruz campaign or whether it's Mr. Trump, Kasich is missing an opportunity here in the great state across Indiana when he's not taking the time to meet with the Hoosiers.
But
that's
what
very
do they
important.
think of the fact? I know everybody wants to meet the candidates, but what do they think of the fact that there was this alliance where they're almost divvying up the electorate as though, you know, they know more about the electorate than the electorate? Any backfiring on that?
Well, I can tell you calls into our office. We've had a lot of people that were very disappointed that Kasich was not taking any time in Indiana. Yeah. And so that was the general gist of the calls that's coming into our headquarters.
But you're not answering my question about whether or not people reacted to this alliance. Like, you take those folks in Indiana, I'll take New Mexico. But let me move on. Okay. Big state. Indiana now has a huge role, and not usually the case because these things are usually decided before you get to Indiana. Okay, so you got Mike Pence, who gives this lukewarm endorsement, and I'll bet even you weren't impressed with it as the governor of Cruz. And then you've got Bobby Knight, the legend, who gives this endorsement to Donald Trump. Which one do you think swayed more of the Hoosiers?
Well, I don't think there's any elected official or any politician that wants to compete with a sports legend like a Bobby Knight. I mean, he is a legend across the state of Indiana, very well respected and very well liked.
Okay, and what about the fact that, you know, Mike Pence came out? You're the chairman. I mean, did you tell Mike, I mean, either make an endorsement totally or stop with this wishy-washy, you know, I like Trump, but I'm probably going to vote for Cruz. Did you think that that hurt him?
Well, we really did not have that discussion. It's one of those things. He wanted to come out and let the people know who he was voting for, but I think more importantly, he wanted to make sure that people knew that this election was extremely important historically for Indiana, and he wants to encourage all Hoosiers to get out and vote and to vote their convictions.
All right, Jeff Cardwell, Chairman, Indiana Republican Party, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, and Donald Trump got people talking this week when he accused Hillary Clinton of playing the woman card. And as you can expect, that got some critics attacking Trump's comments on women. My next guest is someone who may know a little something about this matter. Joining me now from Los Angeles is longtime Donald Trump employee Lily Amini, who is Trump National Golf Club manager. All right, good evening, Lily.
Good evening, Judge. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's good to have you on. Now, how long have you worked for Donald Trump?
11 years.
11 years. And you are the manager of the golf course in California, Trump National?
Exactly. General manager.
All right. So what you've got is a lot of talk, and I'm sure you've been following this race, about Donald Trump's views on women. Is there, you know, as someone who works for Donald Trump, what can you tell us are his views as it relates to women and women in positions of power? I assume you have hundreds of people who work for you?
Absolutely. And, you know, it's crazy because I only realize that I'm a woman running one of his businesses when somebody brings that up to me, because to me it's never been about the woman card. It's always been about the fact that he wants leaders, not male, female, it doesn't matter. It's being a leader and being an executive, a part of his organization. That's always been it. He's treated me equally. He's been tough, and I love it, and I wouldn't want it any other way.
And when people say that, you know, he talks down to women or he's a misogynist or he's this or that, what about the other people who work at Trump National who, you know, are women? I mean, do you hear complaints about that at all?
Not one. I think we love the fact that he is tough, and it's never been about him treating us differently or in a certain way. It's never been a situation along those lines at all. And it's always been frustrating for me listening to everyone on TV say those types of things, because I've had firsthand experience with him for 11 years, and that should say enough.
All right. But you know what? In terms of your experience, Lily, the viewers might be saying, well, of course, she works for him. You know, she gets her, you know, pay from him. What do you say to those people who say, well, we can't expect her to be totally objective? What would you say to them?
And Judge, it's very simple. I don't have to be on your show. I don't have to be out here saying anything. I think the fact that I've worked for him for 11 years and counting speaks volumes.
Okay. What about when you first applied for the job? What was the interview like, Lily?
Well, it's a pretty great story. You know, my parents had done the flowers for the facility back in 2003, and he really just asked me when I was there one day with my dad, you know, who are you? And I said, I'm Hank's daughter, and we struck up a conversation there, and he said, you know what, I want you to work here. And it was the greatest opportunity in the world. And I interviewed with the general manager, and I got the job. And since 2005, it's been this upward staircase to the top. You know, you have to prove yourself. It's not just you can sit back and kind of glide through this business. It's really you have to prove yourself. And since 2005, I've proven myself throughout many, many years and achieving a lot. He's been the biggest mentor to me. The word impossible has never been something he would ever say to behind me. He'd always say, I know you can do it, make us proud. And when you do achieve something within the organization, he's the first one to congratulate you, first one to say, I'm proud of you. And really, that's been my experience through 11 years.
All right. And quickly, what do you think he saw in you, Lily? I mean, it almost sounds like an apprentice situation where he said, she might be good. What was it about you?
Absolutely. Yeah, he has great instincts, I believe, and I think when you strike up a conversation with him, you know, I was a local to the town that we have the golf course in, Palos Verdes, and so I think he understood that I love to work. Obviously, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I think he loved that. And I, you know, talked to him about the facility and what he's done, and I was so proud to have, you know, Trump National Los Angeles as literally my backyard, and I think he understood the passion I had for it, and it's been fantastic working for him.
All right. Lily Amini, thanks so much for sharing those insights and for being with us tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And a tough week for Governor Kasich as Donald Trump sweeps the East. Cruz announces a VP candidate. So what is John Kasich still doing in this race? Joining me now, advisor to the John Kasich campaign and former Pennsylvania Congressman Bob Walker. All right. Good evening, Congressman. How are you?
Nice to be with you, Judge.
Oh, it's nice to talk to you. Now, your strategy is to convince voters that John Kasich is the guy to beat Hillary Clinton. You think your strategy is working?
Yeah, I do. All across the country, in poll after poll, John Kasich shows up as the person who can beat Hillary Clinton. And what we see in all of those polls is that Donald Trump does not beat Hillary Clinton, nor does Ted Cruz. And so in a state like Pennsylvania, where I'm from, we have a poll that shows that John Kasich would beat Hillary Clinton in this state by 16 points. That would mean that the up and down the ticket, the Republicans would benefit.
Okay, so, I mean, this is what we've been hearing for months, that John Kasich is the one guy who can beat Hillary Clinton. But in order to beat Hillary Clinton, doesn't he have to have a few Republicans on his side? And if your answer to that is yes, and I expect it to be, then he can't seem to win the Republicans.
Well, the fact is that he was one of 17 candidates. He is now one of 3 candidates. And so we have moved. Well, he's not. He won his state of Ohio, which, of course, is a crucial state for Republicans to win. We cannot win the general election without winning Ohio.
Right.
And the fact is that he is now finishing in second place in a number of the states. And so we think the candidacy continues to be one which is emerging. And we think that when we get to the convention in Cleveland, that the fact is that delegates there will be interested in who can beat Hillary Clinton.
Right. So he's counting on the convention. Now, I got to ask you this, Congressman. This Cruz-Kasich alliance, which seems to be the most botched, bungled, messed up alliance, where Ted Cruz actually comes out and says, quote, John Kasich made a decision to withdraw from Indiana. I just had the chairman from Indiana say that Kasich was there this past week for a fundraiser. And then Kasich himself says it's something like, I never said that, or I never agreed to that. What was the agreement?
Well, the agreement was that they would expend their resources in various places, and the agreement was that Ted Cruz would expend resources in Indiana, and that John Kasich would expend resources in Oregon and in New Mexico. There was never any thought in the alliance that they wouldn't tell their voters not to vote for them. The idea was that it would conserve resources for both of them to compete in states where they had an opportunity to make an impact.
All right. But doesn't this Cruz-Kasich alliance kind of reek of establishment politics, where a sitting senator and a sitting governor say, you know, in a back room in a way where, you know, Kasich seemed to, he denied, he said, I never told Indiana voters not to vote for me. They should vote for me. So what's the point of not putting your resources in there if you're still telling the people to vote for me? Do you get it? It's
nobody ever said that the voters shouldn't vote for whoever they want to vote for, and we think that John Kasich will get some votes in Indiana because he's a very popular governor in a next-door state, and I think people know that he has the experience to be president of the United States, and a lot of those people are going to vote for him because Trump and Cruz do not have the kind of experience that John Kasich has.
All right. Well, sometimes that establishment experience can backfire, as it seems to be doing now. Anyway, Congressman Bob Walker, thanks so much for being with us.
Sure, nice to be with you.
Thank you. And next, everyone has an opinion how the Indiana primary is going to play out. But there's only one guy who has a crystal ball. Larry Sabato joins me next. Plus, John Bolton is here to talk about Donald Trump's foreign policy plan. You'll also hear my take on that plan in tonight's opening statement in the 9 o'clock hour. And then...
Is Hillary playing the woman card?
Yes.
Okay.
Hillary plays many cards. You never know which one is on the up and up. How's that?
All right. Is she playing with a full deck, though? Street justice. Tonight's topic, Hillary Clinton and whether America's